All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive. And today, we've got something super important.
Absolutely.
Especially for anyone out there who's working with cranes. So this is for you, crane operators, aspiring operators, and of course, you safety and risk managers. We know you're out there listening too.
Keeping everybody in line.
That's right, keeping everybody safe.
Yeah.
That's what they're all about. And big thanks to Safety One Source for bringing this one to the table, because we are talking all about crane operational aids.
It's a big one.
Now we know that these aids, they're designed to keep things running smoothly.
Right.
And most importantly, safely. Right.
Of course.
But what happens when they don't?
Uh-oh.
What happens when an aid fails in the middle of a lift?
That's the question, isn't it?
That's what we're going to unpack today. We're diving deep into the crane operational aid guidelines and trying to figure out what really matters for staying safe and efficient out there on the job.
When things go wrong.
Exactly.
You got to know what to do.
So before we get into the nitty-gritty of specific failures, let's talk about the foundation.
Okay.
I'm thinking those fundamental safety principles that always apply regardless of whether an aid is working or not.
Yeah, that makes sense. You can have all the bells and whistles you want on these cranes, but you absolutely have to have those solid foundations in place.
So those like non-negotiables?
The non-negotiables.
What are we talking about here?
So verified weights, accurately measured radii, and of course you got to have that manufacturer's load rating chart.
You got to have that.
That's your Bible right there.
That's your Bible.
It's going to dictate whether a lift is safe or not.
It's like your backup plan. No matter what happens with the tech, you've got those core principles to fall back on.
Absolutely. And, you know, we've all been there.
Oh, yeah.
We've all been on a job and something's gone wrong.
Something's blinking.
A light's flashing, you get a wonky reading, and you think, oh, what do we do?
Okay, so let's say I'm up in the crane and my load indicator just goes dark. I mean, it's like my eyes have suddenly closed.
Yeah.
What's my move? Do I scramble for the manual midair?
Well, hopefully. Hopefully not. You familiarized yourself with the manufacturer's recommendations for that specific crane and the aids on it before you got in the crane.
Before you even went up.
Exactly.
Okay.
Those recommendations are going to be your go-to resource for dealing with failures.
Okay.
Often they'll have specific procedures outlined, so they'll walk you through step by step what to do.
Okay, that makes total sense. But let's say I'm dealing with a really unusual failure or something, and the manufacturer's instructions are silent on that scenario. That's when those crane operational aid guidelines become even more crucial, right?
Absolutely. That's where they really come into play. They provide a framework for those situations where you don't have that specific manufacturer guidance.
Right.
It's really going to emphasize the roles of a qualified person and the designated lifting operations supervisor.
So it's putting it on those key players.
Absolutely. These people need to step up, assess the situation, and come up with some safe procedures based on their expertise and using those guidelines as a solid foundation.
So it sounds like communication and clear leadership are really key here. It's not just about one person figuring it out. It's about the whole team coming together to find that safe solution.
100%. That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so let's get into some of these specific failures and how the guidelines address them. And I think a good place to start is load indicators or limiters, because these are often our first line of defense against overloads.
Right.
What happens when they go down? What are the potential consequences of a faulty load indicator, and how do those guidelines address that?
So imagine you're lifting a heavy load and your load indicator just goes on the fritz. Give you a really low reading. So you think you're well within the crane's capacity, but in reality, you're right up at the edge, maybe even exceeding them.
Oh, it's so scary.
Yeah, it can be a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Tip overs, structural failures, dropping the load. It's all bad news.
Right. So it's not just about the numbers on a screen. It's about understanding those real world physics at play.
Absolutely. It's about understanding the forces that are acting on that crane.
Yeah.
That's why when a load indicator fails, we go back to basics. We need to rely on those verified weights. We need to make sure our calculations are spot on. And again, go back to that manufacturer's load rating chart.
Always.
It's like taking a step back and just double checking everything manually, you know?
Leaving no room for error.
Exactly.
I like it. So the guidelines, they reference specific sections for dealing with this failure. We're talking 5.3.2.1.1a through 5.3.2.1.1.1 few. What are some of the key takeaways that we should know about from those sections?
Well, those sections really highlight the need for robust procedures, and the designated supervisor, they have a huge role to play in this.
Yeah.
They need to establish how load weights will be determined.
Okay.
And ensure that every single lift is conducted safely within those limits.
So a lot of responsibility there.
Absolutely, and it stresses the importance of communication and documentation.
You got to keep those records.
Yeah, everyone involved needs to be on the same page and understand these adjusted procedures.
All right, makes sense. So let's move on to another one. Let's talk about boom angle or radius indicators.
Okay.
These aids help us position the boom correctly for safe lifting. But what happens when they go haywire? What kind of risks are we looking at then?
Well, an inaccurate boom angle is going to really affect the crane's stability and its lifting capacity.
I see.
You might think you're positioned perfectly,
Right.
but a faulty indicator could be throwing you way off.
That's scary.
It's a bit like trying to walk a tightrope with a blindfold on. You don't know where you are.
That's a terrifying image.
It is a bit scary, isn't it?
So how do the guidelines help us navigate this particular type of failure? Are we just left to eyeball it and hope for the best?
You never want to just eyeball it.
Never eyeball it.
Especially when you're dealing with a crane. So when your boom angle or your radius indicator fails, you got to go back to basics.
Back to the basics again.
Manual measurements. So grab your tape measure, double check that radius, make sure everything aligns with your load charts and your calculations.
Okay.
It's all about precision and taking that guesswork out of the equation.
I like it.
Yeah.
Right, next up, let's talk about a device that is truly a lifesaver, the anti-tube lock device.
Yeah.
These prevent the hook block from being pulled up into the boom tip, which we know can have just catastrophic consequences.
Absolutely.
But what happens when this critical safety device malfunctions?
This is where things get serious. The guidelines are really, really clear on this one.
Okay.
If you have a faulty anti-tube lock device, you do not lift personnel.
No.
No exceptions. The risk is too high, plain and simple.
Yeah.
For other lifts, you need to put some alternative procedures in place, and this could be something like having an extra signal person whose sole job is to keep an eye on that hook block.
Okay, so with the anti-tube lock device, there's no room for compromised safety is the absolute priority.
100%.
Now, what about boom length indicators? How crucial are those, and what happens if those fail?
They might not seem as dramatic as the anti-tube lock device, but those boom length indicators play a vital role in determining that crane's lifting capacity.
Right.
And an incorrect boom length reading can again lead to overloads and instability.
Okay, so let's say our boom length indicator decides to take an early lunge. What's the game plan?
Same as before, you got to have a plan in place, and this is where that designated supervisor is going to come in again.
Okay.
They need to establish really clear procedures, and the guidelines reference those same sections we talked about before.
5.3.2.1.1a through 3.2.1.1b.
You got it. Got to have them memorized.
Might as well.
Okay.
So it's all about having that system in place to determine that actual boom length accurately and adjust your lift plans accordingly.
Okay, fine. Let's talk about level indicators. Why is leveling so crucial for crane operation, and what are the implications of a faulty level indicator?
So think about it like this. Imagine building a house on a foundation that isn't level.
It's going to be really unstable.
Right.
Prone to collapse.
Yeah.
Same principle applies to cranes.
I see.
Leveling ensures that that crane's weight is distributed evenly, maximizing stability and preventing it from tipping over.
So a level indicator is kind of like the crane's spirit level.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. And if it fails, we need to rely on alternative methods. And this is where we go back to that manufacturer's instructions.
Of course.
They may recommend using manual leveling devices or referencing specific landmarks on the crane itself.
So many things to keep in mind.
It's a lot.
And you know what I'm seeing here is that while these operational aids are incredibly helpful, the human element is still paramount.
Right.
We're relying on qualified individuals, supervisors, and everyone on that site to make smart decisions, especially when things go wrong.
100%. And those guidelines really drive home the importance of training, communication, and that rock-solid safety culture on every single job site.
So important. So let's wrap things up. What are some key takeaways that our listeners should keep in mind, especially those working with cranes day in and day out?
I think the biggest takeaway is that these operational aids are great, but they're tools. They can fail, and when they do, we need to be prepared.
Right.
So familiarize yourself with those manufacturers' recommendations.
Yes.
Understand those fundamental safety principles and know how to apply the guidance in those guidelines.
So it's all about being proactive, not reactive.
Absolutely.
Have a plan in place before you step on that job site.
100%. And you know something else to remember.
Yeah.
Everyone has a role to play in crane safety.
That's right.
From the operators to the supervisors, signal persons, riggers, we're all in this together.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
That's the truth.
So here's a final thought to chew on. What steps can you take to advocate for a safer work environment? even when technology isn't 100% reliable. It's a question worth pondering. And of course, huge thanks to Safety One Source for presenting this deep dive with us. Until next time, everyone, stay safe out there.
Stay safe.
We'll see you later.
See you later.